Judging by the title of the video, you can probably guess that this is going to be more of a ranty type video, and you would be correct. For the most part, but more on that later. First things first, I hate the first 8 minutes of Tales of Arise. I am serious. Who actually likes it? It is for nobody. None of the information is vital in order to play the game immediately and still have a sense of what is going on. Just let me start playing the game already. Like, do I really need to know that the Renans took over Dana 3 centuries ago? No, I don't. Neither do I need to know the continent is split into 5 realms, that Balsev is the ruler of the starting area. And don't get me started on the slave part. Because all you need to start playing is, what is my objective? Then, you can tell me all the history that I'll probably just mash A through. And neither is it for the people who want a good story. This trip of having a narrator tell us the backstory of the world and other aspect is a set of writing of sorts. Ideally, you show rather than tell, although there are exceptions when you are better off telling, but that is neither here nor there. But if you have to, you must integrate it into the story seamlessly. Again, this is for nobody. So the best thing to do is to cut it from the game. It is the same problem as fantasy stories have in having a prologue for the sake of having it. Well, other fantasy books have it, so I should have it too. But does it really enhance the story? Some cases yes, other cases no. In this case, no. So get rid of it. I want to scold the game directors for having a cinematic scene as they explain the history of the world, because there are much better ways to info dump on the player. An example is what they did later into the game, where they integrated it into the game perfectly, and it gives us no reason to have the intro scene to begin with. I am talking about the campfire scene. They tell us that the war had been going on for 3 centuries. Balsev is the ruler of Orphis Calaglia, and, well, there's other realms. As well as some other things, like the crown contest, but that is something else entirely. In any case, they have shown us that they are capable of giving exposition that does not feel out of place. So why do they have that intro video when it takes away from the story rather than adds to it? I don't get it. Then they show us the working conditions of the slaves, which already gives us a reason to cut the intro scene, or at the very least, part where they talk about the slaves. I mean, come on. You tell us how they are treated, then immediately show us how they are treated? It makes me think that either they felt the need to have the intro video for whatever reason, or they have no idea what they are doing. It would be one thing if it was set up for something important in the future, but this is just exposition for the sake of having it. There is literally no reason to have the intro scene except for the sake of having it, at least in my opinion. Well, please forgive me. This really does rally me up more than it really should. Another thing I should mention about the intro video, as well as the first scene with the slaves, are that they are both overly dramatic for no good reason. The melodrama from it all had me tuned out from what was going on. I had to rewatch it several times to catch what it was all about, so that I can talk about how terrible it is. And the more I watched it and thought about it some more, the more I hated it. The first 8 minutes of this game. By the way, I only covered about the first 3 minute-ish of the game so far. Now, next we have a boy named Cole, and we have a full-plated armored knight harassing him to push a barrel twice his size, or I guess height. Then, when the knight loses his patience, he swung his sword. Club? Well, whatever. His weapon at the boy. Then a man jumps in, taking the hit instead. My first reaction was like, this is so forced. But now I can see it kind of working. Still forced. But you could have done better, is all I'm gonna say here. But regardless, after that, you find out his name is Iron Mask, and after he takes the hit in place of the boy, the knight does not want to deal with it. But before he can do anything, he is required to move locations, more or less. Thus, Iron Mask takes on Cole's job. After the barrel is dealt with, Cole points out that Iron Mask is bleeding. So he heads to Doc. As you can probably guess, there is an issue that bothers me. Like, first off, do you really expect him to be able to push that? Then what is with the angle on that swing? It will whiff the boy who is not moving, or maybe hit his head, and that would surely kill him. Well, either way, like that or injured to the point of being useless doesn't really change much with how useless he is already. A bit harsh, I know, but I don't care at this point. But I don't get why the knight would attempt to hit a kid that hard to do something when it would likely put the boy out of commission, which will take away from the potential labor working being done from an already high mortality rate from the working condition and living conditions. Sure, this is the reason for that, but what of the slave population? How are you going to replace these workers if they fall so often? I mean, this was going on for 3 centuries. With how they describe the working conditions and how often they died, it sounds like they could have a loose slave population to exploit, especially since they did the same thing from then to now. However, it could be to make sure that the slave population does not get out of hand from all the babies they could be having. But before even getting to the point of living conditions, the baby would likely be a miscarriage or, die really early on. Unless they were breeding slaves, in which case having high mortality would not be the biggest issue, probably. Although I highly doubt they even thought of that because they have a tendency to not think enough of the chain effects of having particular things in the story. I want to be wrong about this, but so far, there are no evidence to think of the contrary. At least for as far as where I am in the story from the time I am recording this. So in other words, I do not believe there to be much of a reason for the knight to swing his pole at Cole with as much force as he did, except for maybe a few situations where they are not doing, but even then, he should have been doing something easier. Like, I don't know, mining? But maybe something a little easier, I guess. Now, I can talk about Iron Mask and Doc. The scene is not particularly bad, but rather, it does not work with what they established. I mean, how is it okay for him to sit around waiting for someone injured to come? They are slaves. What even as a doctor? And even if we let that slide, there would be tons of people coming to see him if they are even allowed to. But if they are not allowed to, then what is it that lets Iron Mask receive medical attention immediately and not others? It is not because he is bleeding, is it? But I do not believe it to be an uncommon thing. I can go on, but I hope that I made this point clear enough. And you know what, this probably doesn't matter because most people, I assume, wouldn't care. But I do, and it bothers me. Especially since it is completely unnecessary, and there are alternatives that are not hard to do. Like, if you want to keep him as a doctor, then have him tend Iron Mask's wound in the night when the knights aren't around. And say he hides some medicine in his clothes. Simple change that can work, and you can have the same conversation, more or less. I want to talk about the dialogue, but A, it is not that bad, and B, I find it exhausting to hate things. However, I will say this about the dialogue, is that you can make it more concise. Other than that, the conversation is not that bad for exposition. Of course, there are some changes I would do, but this is enough hate for one video. Well, there are other reasons, but whatever. So, one way to redo the whole beginning is to start with Iron Mask mining away next to Doc, but as they are working, there are people dying from overwork and from the beating from the knights. Iron Mask gripped the pickaxe even harder and tighter, striking the ground. Doc talks him into not engaging with them. This acts as a way to show how bad the working conditions are with the high mortality rate. It also shows how Doc teaches Iron Mask to live in a place like this, as well as Iron Mask's hatred for the oppressors and desires to help his people. Kind of makes me think of Moses for some reason. Then say you have a knight reach Iron Mask and Doc, where the knight notices Doc working a little too slowly. Before the knight swung the pole, I guess Iron Mask takes the hit, not flinching at all. And things start to escalate, but before anything really happened, the day's working condition came to an end, and they go to their tiny cluttered room. When they lay down on the floor is no longer visible. In the night, when the night were gone, Iron Mask and Doc snuck out to a hidden place where Doc has a little plant growing behind some boulders and whatnots, where he can use the plant as a medicine for Iron Mask, his wound, as well as having their conversation similar to the one they had in the actual game, before heading back to their rooms for the night. With this, we get that Iron Mask will still try to help other Dans despite what Doc tells him. He does not feel pain, but Doc is actually a dog, and that they do hide what they can from the Renans. We can get the infant dump on his amnesia as well. I guess this is all that I really have to say about the beginning, and hopefully you can see why this is a terrible 8 minutes. While I don't think I did the best changes to it, it is better than what we got, that's for sure. With more time, I could probably come up with something better, but this will have to do. I'm sure some of you could create a better beginning than I, but even then, I am intrigued to see what some of you will come up with to make the beginning of a higher quality. On a side note, I am doing a non-commentary playthrough of the game right now, but I only have started, so there won't be many episodes, unless you happen to watch this into the future. In which case, there'll probably be a lot more, if not done. And if you're interested, I will put the link to the description below. And with that, goodbye.